The chamber was enormous, stretching upward into darkness that seemed to swallow light itself. Captain Lee Minho stood at the center of the circular floor, his boots clicking against the polished stone as he approached the speaking platform. Around him, arranged in ascending tiers like an ancient amphitheater, sat the representatives of 47 alien species. Their eyes, some multifaceted, some glowing, some arranged in patterns that hurt to look at directly, all focused on him. Behind Minho stood Dr. Park Ji-won and Ambassador Choi Hyun. Ji-won carried a data tablet that held 30 years of humanity's greatest achievements. Choi wore the formal diplomatic robes that Earth had commissioned specifically for this day. They had traveled 6 months to reach this place, this moment. Everything depended on what happened in the next few hours. Honored members of the Galactic Council, Minho began, his voice steady despite the weight pressing on his chest. I stand before you representing the people of Earth. We come seeking membership in the interstellar community. We come in peace with open hands and open minds. A low hum filled the chamber. The translation devices embedded in the walls converted his words into 47 different languages simultaneously. Minho had practiced this speech 1,000 times, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality of addressing beings whose ancestors had walked among the stars when humanity still lived in caves. Counselor Velthar, a towering avian creature with feathers that shimmered like oil on water, leaned forward on his perch. His beak clicked twice, a sound that the translator rendered as a polite acknowledgement to continue. Minho activated the holographic display. Images of Earth sprang to life around him, gleaming cities reaching toward the sky, ships breaking the light barrier, medical facilities where diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries were now memories. In the 150 years since we first split the atom, humanity has achieved what we once thought impossible. We have eliminated poverty in 70% of our world. We have cured diseases. We have built ships that can cross the space between stars. Dr. Park stepped forward when Minho gestured to her. She was smaller than him, barely reaching his shoulder, but when she spoke, her voice carried clearly through the vast chamber. Our scientific contributions include advances in terraforming technology that could restore dying worlds. We have developed biological adaptation techniques that allow species to survive in previously uninhabitable environments. We have created sustainable energy systems that produce zero waste. She manipulated the holographic display, showing complex equations and three-dimensional models of their innovations. Some of the council members leaned forward with interest. Others remained still as statues. Counselor Draken, a reptilian being whose scales seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, spoke for the first time. His voice was cold, precise. You speak of achievements, but we have reviewed your history. We have seen your wars. Your planet has experienced over 300 major conflicts in the last 2,000 years alone. You have developed 17 different methods to exterminate your own species. Your environmental destruction nearly made your world uninhabitable. Why should we believe you have changed? The question hung in the air like a blade. Minho had known it would come, but the directness still stung. He took a breath before responding. Because we learned from our mistakes, he said. Every species in this chamber has a history. None of you emerged from your homeworlds perfect and peaceful. You all had your wars, your struggles, your dark ages. The difference is that we are honest about ours. We do not hide our past. We study it, learn from it, and use those lessons to build a better future. Counselor Ixtara, an insectoid being whose compound eyes reflected the holographic light in strange patterns, clicked her mandibles. Your emotional volatility is documented. Individual humans act on impulse, on feeling rather than logic. You value the individual over the collective. This makes you unpredictable, dangerous. Chaos follows your species wherever you go. Ambassador Choi stepped forward now, his diplomatic training evident in every measured movement. What you call chaos, we call innovation. What you call emotional volatility, we call passion. Yes, we are individuals. Yes, we feel deeply. But that same passion drives our art, our science, our exploration. We solve problems in ways that pure logic never could because we approach challenges from 1,000 different angles. Every human mind is unique, and that diversity of thought is our greatest strength. The council members conferred among themselves. Their voices created a symphony of alien sounds, chirps, growls, harmonic tones, subsonic rumbles that Minho felt in his chest rather than heard. The translation system could not keep up with the overlapping conversations, rendering only fragments. Too primitive. cannot be trusted. Remember, the incident at Station 12 might destabilize the established order. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, Counselor Velthar raised one wing for silence. The chamber fell quiet immediately. He looked down at the three humans with something that might have been pity. "We have discussed your petition," Velthar said. "We have reviewed your achievements and your history. We have considered your arguments. The Council has reached a decision." Minho's hands clenched at his sides. This was it. 30 years of preparation, 6 months of travel. Everything humanity had worked for since first contact came down to the next words from that alien beak. The Council votes unanimously to reject Earth's petition for membership. The words hit Minho like a physical blow. Behind him, he heard Jiwan's sharp intake of breath. Choi's face remained diplomatically neutral, but his jaw tightened. Furthermore, Velthar continued, his tone formal and final. Humanity is to remain within their currently designated space. You are forbidden from expanding beyond your current systems. Trade will be limited to essential goods only. Contact between Earth and Council species will be minimal and monitored. These restrictions will remain in place until such time as humanity has evolved beyond their primitive nature. Evolved. Minho's voice came out harder than he intended. You're quarantining us like a disease. We are protecting the galaxy, Draken interjected. From chaos, from unpredictability, from a species that has not yet learned to control its own violent impulses. Perhaps in another 1,000 years, when your civilization has matured, we will reconsider. Ambassador Choi raised his hand, requesting permission to speak. Velthar nodded. Honored Council, Choi said, his voice carrying the weight of Earth's disappointment. We came here in good faith. We have shown you our best qualities, our greatest achievements. We have been honest about our flaws. We ask only for the chance to prove ourselves worthy of standing alongside you. Do not judge us solely by our past. Judge us by what we are trying to become. Ixtara's mandibles clicked in what the translator rendered as a dismissive gesture. Your words are eloquent, Ambassador, but words change nothing. The Council has voted. The decision is final. The three humans stood in silence for a moment. Around them, the alien Council members were already turning away, moving on to other business. Humanity's petition had been heard, judged, and dismissed. Just like that, Earth's dreams of joining the galactic community were over. As they walked back toward the exit, Minho glanced at the Council members. They sat in their comfortable seats, secure in their power, confident in their superiority. They had technologies that were millions of years old, civilizations that spanned entire star systems, knowledge that humanity could barely comprehend. But they had something else too. Something Minho noticed in the way they moved, the way they spoke, the way they dismissed humanity without a second thought. They had complacency. They had stagnation. They had forgotten what it meant to struggle, to fight, to overcome impossible odds. The Council thought they were protecting the galaxy from humanity, but as Minho walked out of that chamber, he wondered if maybe they were actually protecting themselves, not from human violence or chaos, but from the uncomfortable reminder of what they used to be before they became soft and satisfied. The door sealed behind them with a sound like finality. The three humans stood in the corridor outside, processing what had just happened. What now? Jiwan asked quietly. Minho looked at his companions, then back at the sealed door. Now we go home, and we show them they made a mistake. The journey back to Earth took 6 months. They had plenty of time to think about what rejection meant. Plenty of time to decide what humanity would do next. By the time their ship entered Earth's orbit, Minho had made up his mind. If the galaxy would not accept humanity as they were, then humanity would forge their own path among the stars. They would not beg for approval. They would not change who they were to fit someone else's expectations. They would become something the galaxy had never seen before, something the Council would one day regret dismissing so easily. The news of the rejection spread across Earth like wildfire. In every city, every town, every settlement from the Arctic to the Antarctic, people gathered around screens to watch as Ambassador Choi delivered the Council's verdict. Some wept, others raged. Many simply felt numb, processing the reality that humanity had been judged and found wanting by civilizations that had walked the stars for millions of years. But within weeks, something unexpected began to happen. The despair transformed into something harder, more determined. If the galaxy would not accept humanity, Then humanity would accept themselves. They would prove their worth not to alien counselors, but to their own future generations. Admiral Kim Doyen stood on the bridge of the newly commissioned warship Defiance, watching through the viewport as dozens of ships took shape in the orbital shipyards above Earth. Each vessel was being built to new specifications, designs that owed nothing to Council technology or standards. Every system, every weapon, every engine was human-made, human-tested, human-perfected. "Sir, the production facilities on Mars are now operating at full capacity," reported his first officer. "Luna Base reports the same. We're ahead of schedule on the new fleet construction." Doyen nodded, his weathered face illuminated by the blue glow of the construction lights. He was 60 years old, too old for active combat by traditional standards, but the rejection had changed many things. Earth needed experienced leaders now more than ever. "Good. What about the weapon development programs?" "Engineer Yoon is requesting more resources for her project. She says she's close to a breakthrough on the adaptive targeting systems. Give her whatever she needs." Down on Earth's surface, in a research facility buried deep beneath the Korean peninsula, engineer Yoon Seojin worked through her third consecutive night without sleep. Her team surrounded her, dozens of the brightest minds humanity could offer, all focused on a single goal: making weapons and defenses that did not rely on anything the Council had ever shared with them. "The problem with Council technology," Yoon explained to her exhausted team, "is that it's standardized. Every species uses the same basic principles because they've been trading and sharing for millions of years. They've optimized everything to the point where innovation is rare, but we don't have their knowledge, so we have to innovate or fail." She pulled up holographic displays showing weapon designs that would have seemed insane to Council engineers. Missiles that could change their attack patterns mid-flight. Energy weapons that randomized their frequencies to prevent adaptation. Shields that strengthened under fire rather than weakened. "We're not trying to build better versions of what they have," Yoon continued. "We're building things they've never imagined, because we're not bound by their rules or their assumptions." Meanwhile, on the frontier of human space, Governor Han Mirai oversaw the colonization of the 7th New World since the rejection. The planet was harsh, with gravity 30% higher than Earth standard and an atmosphere that required modifications to breathe comfortably. But it was habitable, it was within human territory, and it was theirs. "How many settlers in this wave?" she asked her assistant as they walked through the newly constructed habitat domes. 50,000, with another 100,000 scheduled for next year. "The terraforming teams say we can have this world fully adapted for human life within a generation." Mirai looked out through the transparent dome at the alien landscape beyond. Strange plants with purple leaves swayed in wind that howled louder than anything on Earth. 2 moons hung in a sky that was more green than blue. It was beautiful and terrifying and utterly unlike home. "Good," she said. "Every world we settle is a world the Council can never take from us. Every person born out here among the stars is proof that we belong here, regardless of what any alien bureaucrat thinks." All across human space, similar conversations were happening. Shipyards built vessels at a pace that shocked even their own planners. Research facilities pushed the boundaries of known science. Training academies taught new tactics that emphasized humanity's strengths: flexibility, creativity, the ability to adapt and overcome, and through it all, humanity maintained complete silence with the Council. Every diplomatic channel was closed. Every trading post abandoned. Human ships stopped appearing at neutral stations. The few Council observers stationed near human territory reported back that Earth had recalled all vessels and gone dark. The Council, comfortable in their vast territories, barely noticed. A few officials filed reports about the human situation, but most were satisfied that the problem had been handled. The dangerous, chaotic species had been properly contained. They would eventually accept their place or fade into obscurity. Councillor Velthar reviewed the reports in his private chambers, his aging eyes scanning the sparse data about human activity. "They have accepted the verdict," he told his aide. "No attempts at expansion beyond their designated zones. No violations of the restrictions. Perhaps they are not as reckless as we feared." What Velthar could not see, what no Council observer could penetrate, was the transformation occurring behind humanity's self-imposed silence. Earth and her colonies had become a closed system, yes, but within that system, They were evolving at a rate that would have alarmed any council member who understood what was happening. 20 years passed. On the galactic scale, 20 years was nothing. Council species lived for centuries. Their governments remained stable for millennia. Their technologies improved by tiny increments over spans of time that made human lifetimes seem like heartbeats. But for humanity, 20 years was everything. An entire generation grew up knowing they had been rejected by the galaxy. They learned from childhood that they could rely only on themselves, that their worth was not determined by alien approval, that humanity's destiny was theirs to forge. Admiral Kim Doyen, now 80 years old but still sharp, stood once again on the bridge of the Defiance. But the ship that surrounded him was no longer the vessel he had commanded 2 decades earlier. It had been retrofitted, upgraded, and enhanced with technologies that made its original design seem primitive by comparison. "Status report," he commanded. "Sir, we have 300 warships in active service with another 100 in production. Our defensive installations cover every human world. Our sensor networks can detect council vessels up to 15 light-years away. And Engineer Yoon's latest project has just entered final testing." Do-yoon allowed himself a rare smile. The girl who had worked herself to exhaustion 2 decades ago was now a mature woman whose innovations had revolutionized human warfare. She had kept her promise. Every weapon system, every defense grid, every tactical advantage humanity now possessed was the result of pure human ingenuity. Governor Han Mirai, now overseeing 43 colonized worlds, attended the Council of Governors meeting via holographic link. Around the virtual table sat the leaders of every human settlement beyond Earth. Some governed garden worlds that had required minimal terraforming. Others ruled over harsh planets, where every breath had to be earned through technology and determination. "The population census is complete," announced the governor of New Tokyo. "We now number 18 billion souls across all human territories. We have achieved complete self-sufficiency in food, energy, and material resources. We no longer need anything from the council. Not just self-sufficient," added the governor of Frontier Station. "We're thriving. Our economic growth rate exceeds anything in recorded human history. Our scientific advancement is accelerating. Our people are healthy, educated, and ready for whatever comes next." Mirai listened to the reports with satisfaction. The rejection that had seemed like a death sentence 20 years ago had instead become a catalyst. Without access to council technology, humanity had been forced to innovate. Without council interference, they had developed their own culture, their own identity, their own way of doing things. They were no longer a species begging for acceptance. They were a civilization that stood on its own. In the council chambers, Scout Commander Rick Sala submitted another routine report about human space. Energy signatures detected at multiple locations. Unusual patterns consistent with advanced manufacturing and possibly military buildup. Recommend further investigation. The report was filed and forgotten. Counselor Draken glanced at it briefly before dismissing it. Let the humans play with their toys. They are contained within their territories. They pose no threat. But then at the edge of council space, something happened that would change everything. A mining colony on the outer rim sent a distress signal. The message was fragmentary, panicked, barely coherent. But the key words were clear enough. Unknown vessels. Attacking. Nothing stops them. Please send. Then silence. The council dispatched a patrol to investigate. The ships arrived to find the mining colony completely destroyed. Not just damaged or abandoned, but consumed. Every structure was gone. Every piece of technology had been stripped away. Even the atmosphere processing stations had been dismantled down to their component atoms. And in the empty space where the colony had been, sensors detected traces of something the council had never encountered before, something that was simultaneously organic and technological, something that moved and thought and acted with purpose. The void swarm had arrived. The council chamber, once a place of calm deliberation, now echoed with voices raised in panic and anger. Councillor Velthar, now ancient and frail, struggled to maintain order as representatives from a dozen species shouted simultaneously. The translation system could barely keep up with the overlapping demands, accusations, and pleas for help. Silence. Velthar's voice, amplified by the chamber's systems, finally cut through the chaos. We will address this crisis with reason, not panic. Fleet Commander Drakes, daughter of the now-deceased Counselor Draken, stood at the center of the chamber. Her scales, unlike her father's light-absorbing darkness, gleamed like polished obsidian. She had spent her entire life preparing for military command, but nothing in her training had prepared her for this. "The situation is dire," she reported, her voice steady despite the fear she felt. "In the past month, we have lost 17 colonies to the Void Swarm. Our casualties number in the billions. Every fleet we send achieves initial success, but the enemy adapts within hours. Tactics that work once never work again." She activated holographic displays showing the swarm's advance. It was not a scattered attack, but a methodical wave of destruction, moving through council space like a dark tide consuming everything in its path. Dr. Ixtal, grandson of the former Counselor Ixtara, manipulated the tactical displays with his delicate insectoid limbs. "We have analyzed recovered swarm material. It is a fusion of organic and synthetic components capable of rapid evolution. It learns from every encounter. Every weapon we use against it becomes less effective over time. Then we must use weapons they have not encountered," suggested a council member from the avian delegation. "Deploy technologies we have kept in reserve." "We have," Drakes replied grimly. "The swarm adapted to them within 3 engagements. We have thrown everything in our arsenal at this threat. Nothing stops it for long." The chamber fell silent. For millions of years, the council had maintained peace and stability through overwhelming technological superiority. They had weapons that could crack planets, shields that could withstand stars, but all of it meant nothing against an enemy that learned and adapted faster than they could innovate. On the bridge of her flagship Eternity's Edge, Fleet Commander Drakes reviewed casualty reports with a heavy heart. The numbers were staggering. Entire fleets had been decimated. Worlds that had stood for millions of years were now empty, consumed by the swarm's insatiable hunger for resources. "Commander," her tactical officer reported, "we're receiving distress calls from Sanctuary 7. The swarm has breached their outer defenses. 7 million refugees are trapped on the surface." Drakes studied the tactical display. Sanctuary 7 was a fortress world, designed to withstand any assault. It had defensive installations that should have stopped anything in the known galaxy. But the swarm was not from the known galaxy, and it cared nothing for what should or should not be possible. "Dispatch the 4th and 7th fleets," she ordered. "We cannot lose Sanctuary 7. The battle that followed would become infamous in Council history. The combined fleets arrived to find Sanctuary 7 surrounded by swarm vessels that defied every principle of ship design. They were organic and mechanical simultaneously, shifting their configurations mid-battle, adapting to every attack pattern the Council forces employed. The 4th Fleet opened fire with particle beams that had ended conflicts for 10,000 years. The swarm vessels absorbed the first volley, their hulls rippling like living tissue. The second volley proved less effective. By the third, the swarm had adapted completely, their ships now immune to particle weapons. The 7th Fleet tried kinetic missiles, relativistic kill vehicles traveling at 99% light speed. The swarm vessels split apart, reforming after the missiles passed through them like water closing after a stone passes through. Within 6 hours, both fleets were in full retreat. They had lost 40% of their ships and accomplished nothing. The swarm continued its assault on Sanctuary 7's surface, methodically stripping away the planet's defenses. Back in the council chambers, Counselor Velthar made a decision that would have been unthinkable 20 years earlier. His wings trembled with age and exhaustion as he spoke, but his voice was clear. "We must reach out to humanity." The chamber erupted in protests. "They rejected our offer. They have been silent for 20 years. We do not even know if they still exist." Velthar raised one wing for silence. "We made a mistake 20 years ago. We judged humanity too harshly. We dismissed them as primitive and chaotic when those very qualities might be exactly what we need now." The swarm adapts to order and logic. Perhaps humanity's chaos is our only hope. Dr. Ixtal clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "The counselor may be correct. Our methods have failed because we approach warfare with predictability. The swarm anticipates our strategies because we follow established patterns. Humanity's unpredictability might be an advantage we lack. But how do we contact them?" Drakes asked. "All channels have been closed for 2 decades. We do not know their current capabilities or even their exact locations. They have hidden themselves completely from our sensors." "Send messages on every frequency," Velthar commanded. Broadcast to all of human space. Beg if we must. 7 million lives hang in the balance at Sanctuary 7 alone. Billions more across the Council territories. We need help, regardless of our pride. The messages went out into the void. Desperate pleas from a civilization that had once dismissed humanity as unworthy. They broadcast apologies, offers of trade, promises of full Council membership. Anything to get humanity's attention. Deep in human space aboard the flagship Indomitable, Admiral Lee Minho received the distress signals. He was older now, his hair gone gray, but his eyes still held the same sharp intelligence they had possessed when he stood before the Council 20 years ago. "They're begging," said Captain Kang Ji-soo, his second-in-command. She was younger, born after the rejection, part of the generation that had grown up with the shame and used it as fuel. "The mighty Council is begging us for help." Minho listened to the messages in silence. He heard the panic, the desperation, the barely concealed fear. Part of him, the part that still remembered the humiliation of that day in the Council chamber, wanted to ignore them. Let them face this threat alone. Let them understand what rejection truly meant. But Minho had not spent 20 years preparing humanity for war, only to become the very thing the Council had feared. He had not built this fleet to abandon innocence to destruction. "What do we know about this swarm?" he asked. Dr. Park Ji-won, now his chief science advisor, pulled up the data they had gathered from long-range sensors. "It's unlike anything in our databases. Organic-synthetic hybrid, highly adaptive, learns from every engagement. The Council's weapons are becoming less effective with each battle." "Perfect," Minho said, surprising everyone on the bridge. "That means they've taught the swarm to counter everything in the Council's arsenal. But they've never seen what we can do." He stood, straightening his uniform. "Get me Admiral Kim. Tell him to prepare the fleet. And someone get me Governor Mireille. We need the Council of Governors to authorize this." "Sir, we could just ignore them," Kang suggested. "After what they did to us, we could," Minho agreed. "But then we would be no better than they were. They judged us without truly knowing us. Let us not make the same mistake." He looked at his crew, at the faces of men and women who had spent their entire lives preparing for a war they thought would never come. "Besides, if we save Council lives, they will owe us a debt they can never repay. And that, Captain, is a position of strength we've never had before." The Human High Command met in emergency session. Governor Mireille attended from her colony world, her image projected among the other leaders. Admiral Kim Do-yeon appeared from Earth, ancient now but still commanding. Scientists, military leaders, politicians, and colony representatives all had their say. The debate lasted hours. Some argued for isolation, for letting the Council reap what they had sown. Others pointed out that if the swarm destroyed the Council, humanity would be next. Still others argued from pure morality. They had the power to help, therefore they should help. In the end, the vote was close, but the decision was made. Humanity would intervene. Not for the Council's sake, but because it was the right thing to do. Admiral Minho received the authorization and immediately began planning. He studied every report about the swarm, every tactical engagement, every failed strategy the Council had attempted, and he began to see the pattern of their failures. "They're fighting the same way they've fought for millions of years," he told his tactical team. "Disciplined formations, predictable strategies. They think like machines. And the swarm has learned to anticipate machines. We need to think like humans." He began issuing orders that would have horrified any Council commander. Randomized attack patterns, ships authorized to break formation on the judgment of individual captains, weapon systems that changed their output unpredictably, tactics that seemed insane until they suddenly worked. At Sanctuary 7, Fleet Commander Drake Hess watched her defensive lines crumble. The swarm was pressing harder now, sensing weakness. In a few more hours, the human ships tore through the swarm formation like knives through water. Fleet Commander Drakes had commanded battles for 40 years, but she had never seen anything like this. The humans did not maintain orderly formations or follow predictable patterns. Instead, they moved like a school of fish, individual ships weaving and darting in ways that should have been chaotic, but somehow formed a greater whole. Captain Kang Ji-soo's ship, the Indomitable, led the vanguard. Her weapon systems opened fire with energy beams that shifted frequency every 3 seconds, never giving the swarm time to adapt. When the swarm vessels tried to reconfigure their shields, she switched to kinetic rounds. When they adapted to those, She deployed missiles that could change their attack vectors mid-flight, based on the judgment of their onboard computers. "Target the central cluster," Minho ordered from his command ship. "Captain Kang, take your squadron through their left flank. Make them think we're trying to break their formation, then pull back when they respond." "Sir, that will put us in a vulnerable position," Kang responded, even as she was already executing the maneuver. "Exactly. We need them to think they can predict us, then prove them wrong." The swarm took the bait. Their ships moved to counter Kang's squadron, adapting their formation to block what appeared to be a flanking maneuver. But the moment they committed, Minho sent 3 more squadrons through the gaps they had created. The swarm vessels, caught in the midst of adapting to one threat, were suddenly facing attacks from 4 different directions with 4 different weapon types. Pilot Otajan screamed through the chaos in his fighter craft, dodging swarm projectiles by centimeters. He was 23 years old, born the year humanity was rejected, and he flew with the reckless confidence of someone who had never known defeat. His targeting computer marked enemy vessels, but Taijin ignored half the suggestions, trusting his instincts instead. "Blue Squadron, on me," he called out. "We're going to thread the needle." "Taijin, that gap is too small," his wingman protested. "Perfect. They'll think we're crazy to try it." 6 fighters followed Taijin through a space barely wider than their wingspans, emerging in the middle of the swarm formation. For 3 precious seconds they had clear shots at vulnerable targets. Taijin's missiles found their marks. 6 swarm vessels disintegrated before the enemy could respond. On the Eternity's edge, Drakes watched in stunned silence as the human fleet dismantled the swarm forces that had been overwhelming her fleets for hours. "How are they doing this? The swarm should be adapting." Her science officer studied the sensor data in disbelief. "They are adapting, Commander. But the humans keep changing their tactics faster than the swarm can learn. Every attack is different. Every squadron uses different weapons and strategies. The swarm has never encountered this level of unpredictability." Dr. Park Jiwon, monitoring the battle from the human command ship, watched her screens with satisfaction. 20 years of research was paying off. Every weapon system had been designed specifically to counter adaptation. Nothing was standardized. Nothing was predictable. Even human commanders did not know exactly what their fellow ships would do next. "The Council fights like a machine," she explained to the junior officers around her. "Efficient, logical, predictable. They perfect a strategy and use it forever, but we fight like humans. Every battle is different. Every commander brings their own style. We adapt faster than the enemy can because adaptation is built into everything we do." The battle for Sanctuary 7 lasted 4 hours. By the end, the swarm had lost 60% of its forces and was retreating. The human fleet had lost 12 ships and taken damage to 40 more. But they had achieved the impossible. They had driven back an enemy that had seemed unstoppable. Minho opened a channel to Drakes. "Fleet Commander, Sanctuary 7 is secure. We're pursuing the swarm remnants out of the system. Your refugees are safe." Drakes found her voice after a moment of silence. "Admiral Minho, I do not know what to say. You saved 7 million lives today. After how we treated your people. Why did you come?" "Because it was the right thing to do," Minho replied simply. "And because innocent people do not deserve to die for the mistakes of their leaders." The news of humanity's intervention spread through council space like lightning. Admiral Lee Minho, the captain who had been rejected with contempt 20 years ago, had returned as humanity's savior. The species deemed too primitive for galactic society had achieved what the Council's million-year-old military could not. Counselor Velthar requested an immediate meeting. His holographic image appeared on the bridge of Minho's ship, showing an elderly avian who looked far older than his years. The weight of his mistakes had aged him terribly. "Admiral Minho," Velthar began, his voice trembling. "On behalf of the Galactic Council, I offer our deepest gratitude and our most sincere apologies. 20 years ago, we made a terrible judgment. We dismissed humanity based on fear and prejudice. Your actions today have shown us how wrong we were." Minho's expression remained neutral. "We did not come for your gratitude, Counselor. We came because people needed help. Nevertheless, you have it. And more than that, we hope you can help us learn. Our forces are failing against the swarm, but you have found a way to fight them effectively. Please, will you share your methods?" "That depends," Minho said. "Are you willing to accept that your way is not the only way? That efficiency and predictability might be weaknesses rather than strengths?" That sometimes chaos and emotion produce better results than pure logic? Velthar lowered his head. We are willing to learn, Admiral. Desperation has taught us humility. Over the following weeks, human ships appeared throughout Council space, reinforcing defensive positions and engaging swarm forces wherever they appeared. With each battle, the pattern became clearer. Council forces following traditional tactics were slaughtered. Human forces using adaptive, unpredictable strategies achieved victories. Fleet Commander Drakes requested permission to train with the human fleet. She arrived aboard the Indomitable with a delegation of her best commanders, expecting formal briefings and strategic lectures. Instead, Captain Kang took them to the pilot ready room where Otejun and his squadron were playing cards and arguing about flight tactics. This is your command center? Drakes asked in confusion. This is where we let our pilots think, Kang replied. Watch. Taejin was demonstrating a maneuver by making wild gestures with his hands. See, the computer says this angle is too steep, that I'll burn out my engines. But if I pulse the thrust instead of maintaining constant burn, I can make the turn and still have power left for the next move. That is incredibly dangerous, another pilot objected. Yeah, but it works. I've done it 3 times in combat. You're insane. Probably, but I'm still alive. Drakes watched this exchange with growing understanding. The humans did not have perfect discipline or rigid hierarchies. They argued, they questioned, they improvised. Every pilot brought their own style to combat. Every commander developed their own tactics. And somehow from this apparent chaos they achieved a level of effectiveness that the Council's rigid structure could never match. You want us to fight like this, she said slowly, to encourage individuality instead of conformity. Can you? Minho asked. Your species has followed the same military doctrines for thousands of years. Can you learn to think differently? Drakes thought about her father, about the rigid beliefs that had led him to reject humanity. She thought about the billions of lives lost because the Council had been too proud to admit they might be wrong. Then she looked at the young human pilots who fought with passion and creativity, instead of just training and discipline. Teach us, she said. Please show us how to fight like humans. The training was difficult. Council officers struggled against millennia of conditioning. They had been taught that discipline meant following orders precisely, that strategy meant perfecting established patterns, that chaos was the enemy of victory. Learning to embrace uncertainty, to trust instinct over protocol, to improvise rather than plan went against everything they knew. But slowly they adapted. Drakes proved to be a quick study, learning to think in terms of possibilities rather than certainties. Other Council commanders followed her example. The more flexible species took to human tactics more easily. The more rigid ones struggled but persisted because failure meant death. In a battle above the world of New Haven, a combined human Council fleet engaged a massive swarm force. Drakes commanded a wing of Council ships, but instead of maintaining standard formation, she split her forces into smaller groups. Each group attacked from different angles using different weapons, coordinating through rapid communication rather than preset plans. When the swarm adapted to one group's tactics, Drakes did something no Council commander had ever done before. She abandoned her plan mid-battle and let individual captains make their own decisions based on what they were seeing. It was chaos. It was terrifying. It was effective. The Council forces, fighting like humans for the first time in their history, achieved their first independent victory against the swarm. After the battle, as Drakes reviewed the results, she felt something she had not experienced in months: hope, not just for survival but for victory. The humans had shown them a path forward. Dr. Park Ji-won stood before a holographic display showing a sector of space that no one had visited in recorded history. The data she had gathered from captured swarm material had led her here, to coordinates that existed beyond all known star charts. Somewhere in that darkness was the nexus, the heart of the swarm, the source of the invasion that had nearly destroyed the galaxy. Are you certain? Admiral Minho asked, studying the dark space with the eyes of someone who had spent decades learning to see what others missed. As certain as I can be, Park replied. Every piece of swarm technology we have analyzed points toward a central coordination system. The individual units are intelligent, but they all reference something deeper, something that guides their evolution and adaptation. If we destroy the nexus, the swarm should collapse. Should, Minho repeated. That is a dangerous word to base a mission on. It is the only word we have left, Park said quietly. We have slowed them, pushed them back, but we have not stopped them. Every day they learn more about how we fight. Eventually they will adapt even to our chaos. We must end this before that happens. Minho called an emergency meeting of all human and council military leadership. In the holographic conference room, dozens of faces appeared. Humans, avians, reptilians, insectoids, and species whose forms defied easy description, all gathered to hear the plan that might save the galaxy or doom them all. The mission is simple, Minho explained, though everyone present knew that simplicity and ease were not the same thing. We send a strike force to the Nexus location and destroy it. The problem is that this region of space is filled with anomalies. FTL travel is unstable. Communication will be impossible once we enter, and the swarm's strongest forces will be protecting their heart. Fleet Commander Drakes studied the data with growing concern. Those anomalies will prevent retreat. Any ship that goes in must be prepared to not come back. I know, Minho said. That is why I'm only asking for volunteers. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Every human captain volunteered. So did Drakes and half the council forces. They had all seen what the swarm could do. They all knew what failure meant. And they all understood that some things were worth dying for. In the end, Minho selected 200 ships. It was a relatively small force, but size meant nothing in this operation. Speed, creativity, and the ability to adapt would determine success or failure. He chose Captain Kang Jisoo to lead the vanguard. He chose pilot Otajan and his squadron for close support. He chose Drakes to command the council contingent. And he would lead the operation personally. Governor Han Mirai attended the send-off ceremony from her colony world. She stood before a crowd of millions, human and alien alike, all watching as the strike force prepared to depart. Her voice carried to every world in human space. 20 years ago we were told we were not good enough, she said. We were told our chaos made us dangerous, our emotions made us weak. Our individuality made us unfit for civilized society. Today, that same chaos, those same emotions, that same individuality may be all that stands between the galaxy and extinction. She looked directly into the cameras, knowing Admiral Minho would be watching. To the men and women of the strike force, you carry with you the hopes of 18 billion humans and trillions of council citizens. But more than that, you carry proof that rejection does not define us, that being different is not being lesser, that sometimes the qualities others fear are exactly the qualities the universe needs. In the hangar bay of the Indomitable, Captain Kang Jisoo walked among her crew. Many were young, born after the rejection, raised in a humanity that knew only self-reliance and determination. Others were veterans who had trained for 20 years for a war they thought would never come. All of them understood they might not return. Scared? Asked her second officer, a young woman named Lee Hana. Terrified, Kang admitted, but also ready. We have prepared our entire lives for this moment. Everything we have built, everything we have learned, everything we are comes down to what happens in the next few hours. The fleet launched. 200 ships, human and council, jumped to FTL and raced toward the darkness at the edge of known space. Behind them, they left a galaxy holding its breath, praying for a miracle. The journey took 6 hours. When they dropped out of FTL at the coordinates Park had calculated, they found themselves in a region of space that defied physics. Stars burned in colors that should not exist. Space itself seemed to ripple and bend, and at the center of it all they found the Nexus. It was vast beyond comprehension, a structure that dwarfed entire planets. It was organic and mechanical simultaneously, pulsing with energy that registered on sensors as both matter and something else entirely. And surrounding it were swarm vessels by the thousands, far more than any previous engagement. Well, Otajan said from his fighter cockpit, at least we found the right place. Minho studied the tactical display, calculating odds that were so far beyond hopeless that they circled back to almost amusing. They were outnumbered 50-1. They were in hostile space where retreat was impossible. They were facing an enemy that had adapted to most of their tactics. By any logical calculation, they had already lost. But humans had never been very good at logic. All ships, this is Admiral Minho, he broadcast to the fleet. The plan we prepared will not work. There are too many enemies and the Nexus is too well defended. So we are going to do what humans do best. We are going to improvise. He outlined a new strategy in broad strokes, leaving the details to individual commanders. It was insane. It would require split-second timing, absolute trust, and more luck than any sane person would rely on. Drakes listened to the plan and understood that she was either flying with geniuses or madmen. Probably both. The battle began with Captain Kang's squadron driving straight toward the Nexus like a spear aimed at the heart of the swarm. It was a feint, meant to draw the enemy's attention, to make them commit their forces to defending the center. But it was also real because Kang had every intention of making it to the Nexus if the opportunity arose. Taejin and his fighters provided cover, their small craft dancing through swarm fire with the reckless skill of pilots who trusted their instincts more than their instruments. When Taejin's targeting computer told him a maneuver was impossible, he did it anyway. When his flight path computer warned him about collision risks, he flew closer to danger, not farther from it. The swarm responded exactly as expected, concentrating forces to stop Kang's drive. But that left gaps in their formation, gaps that Admiral Minho exploited ruthlessly. Human and Council ships poured through the openings, attacking from angles the swarm had not anticipated, because no sane military force would leave themselves so exposed. Dr. Park watched from the science station, monitoring the Nexus's energy patterns. She was looking for a weakness, a vulnerability, some way to bring down a structure that seemed indestructible. The raw data was overwhelming, but somewhere in the chaos of numbers and readings there had to be an answer. Then she saw it. The Nexus was not one structure but thousands of components working in harmony. If they could disrupt that harmony, create discord in the synchronization, the entire thing might collapse. But it would require getting close enough to deploy a specialized weapon she had developed specifically for this possibility. Getting close meant going through the heaviest concentration of swarm forces. "Admiral," she reported, "I have found our target. But someone needs to deliver the payload directly to the Nexus core. The guidance systems won't work in these anomalies. It will require a manual approach." Everyone on the bridge understood what that meant. Manual approach meant a pilot flying close enough to deploy the weapon personally, close enough that they would be inside the blast radius when it detonated. "I will do it," Captain Kang said immediately. "No," Minho replied. "I need you commanding the fleet. Someone else will make the run." "Admiral, with respect, I am the best pilot we have for this mission," Kang argued. "No, you are not." Taejin's voice came over the communication channel. He broke formation before anyone could stop him, his fighter accelerating toward the Nexus at speeds that would have torn apart a lesser craft. Behind him, his squadron followed without being ordered, loyal to the end. "Taejin, stand down," Minho commanded. "That is an order." "Sorry, sir," Taejin replied, his voice calm despite the impossible odds he faced. "I seem to be experiencing communication difficulties. Must be the anomalies." He flew like he had never flown before, his fighter weaving through swarm fire that grew denser with every meter. His shields failed. His armor took hits that should have destroyed him, but he kept flying, kept pushing forward, because behind him were billions of lives depending on someone being crazy enough to try the impossible. His squadron members fell one by one, sacrificing themselves to clear his path. By the time Taejin reached the Nexus, he was alone, his fighter barely holding together, but he was there. He armed the weapon Dr. Park had designed, locked onto the target she had identified, and launched. The weapon struck true. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the Nexus began to pulse erratically. The harmony that had connected thousands of components began to break down. Discord spread through the structure like cracks spreading through ice.